Before we start this video, large thank you to Bark Mober, the legend who always reminds me when I forget to post stuff, Daniel DeCastro, Lemonade, Shu Milik, Michael, and Gustavo. Thank you very much for the support, gentlemen, and I hope you enjoy the video. And as always, an immense thank you to Halo Burner for their continued support of the channel this month on Patreon. It is always greatly and sincerely appreciated, my friend, and I hope you enjoy the video. Hello everybody, today we're going to do AI character drops. If you want to see how it looks, just fast forward to the end of the video. I'm going to start by making a script, the AI character inventory manager. Now let's open that up, let's go into Visual Studio here, and let's drop in our namespace, delete the start and update functionality as is per tradition. And the first thing I'm going to do is make this derive from the character inventory manager, which don't think has any logic, and that's okay, we don't need anything on it. And I'm going to make a public void drop item function. This is going to be called every time an AI character dies. So let's make a header here now for loot settings. And just call this whatever you want. I'm going to call it loot chance or just loot settings. It doesn't really matter. Let's make an int for drop item chance, and I'm going to set it to 10. You could make it a float. The idea here is I'm going to set it to a number between 0 and 100, and that will be the percentage of a chance that you will get a drop. So I'm using 100 because then it's just really easy to discern what percentage you will have. So I'm going to make a local variable here called int, or item chance roll rather, and I'm going to initialize that to be equal to random.range 0 and 100. Now all we do is check to see if this item chance roll is less than or equal to our drop item chance, and basically if it is, then we are going to drop an item. You know, just to be clear, I'll make a bool here for that so it reads easier. Bool will drop item is equal to false, and then if this is less or equal to than the drop chance, the bool drop item is equal to true, and I'll add some comments here as well in a second. So we're going to say if will drop item, then we want to run some logic, or if will not drop item, sorry, let's return, that looks nicer. And now I'm going to fill this up with some comments. So this is obvious the status of if we'll drop an item or not, and this is the random number roll from 0 to 100. So an example, if we have 10 here, like we have up here, there's a 10% chance you will drop an item. So if it is equal to or lower than that. Alright, cool. So now we have discerned how we're going to decide if we drop an item or not, because Elden Ring's items are just very simple. There's no rare tables or anything that I know of anyway. So we're going to make a local variable for item, call that item generated. And then right below that, I'm just going to make a serializable field, and I'm going to make an array of items. And this is the possible items that the creature can drop. So in Elden Ring, usually it's a piece of its armor or a weapon that it's holding, etc., etc. So item, generated item, is equal to droppable items, random.range, 0, and droppable items.length. This just basically means it's going to select one from the array I've created. Depending on how many items there are, it'll just sort through those and pick one randomly. Okay, cool. Now let's go over to the world item database. And let's make a public game object for the pickup item prefab. Specifically though, this one's for creature drops because we're going to use a different prefab for our world item drops just to keep it under the same script. You could make different scripts altogether if you want, but I'm just going to keep it on the same because they still have some crossover. So under drop item, the first thing we're going to do is basically make it so for not an owner. Oh, make sure your awake method on the character inventory manager exists, just because we're going to override it now. We're going to override it and call the AI character manager and get that as a component on this object. And then we're going to check to see if this AI character manager is the owner. And if it's not, we're going to return and not run drop item. You can alternatively also check for this when we call it on the onIsDeadChange network function. You can check it there, but I'm just going to put it right here. So we don't want to run this logic if we're not the owner because we're going to spawn an item, and that's going to make a spawn a network object, which you can't do unless you are the host. And the owner of the AI will always be the host in our project. So right down at the bottom of drop item here, we're going to say if generated item is equal to null, simply return. Otherwise, we are going to make a local variable for a game object, item pickup interactable game object, and we're going to initialize that by instantiating a copy of the prefab that we just put on the world item database that doesn't exist yet. We're going to make that in a moment. So it's world item database.instance.pickup item prefab. Cool, what's next? Well, there's a couple things we have to do here. We have to get the pickup item interactable script that's on that. We're going to get that by referencing the game object we just instantiated. And then we're going to say .getComponent pickup item interactable. All right, we have to spawn the network object as well, and then do a few things with some variables we don't have yet. So what we want to do is change a network item ID. This ID is not the right one though, because this one is the item ID for the world that tells you if you've already eluded this. So we're going to have to change the name of that variable because it's going to get a bit confusing if we don't. But that's okay. So back over here now, let's use either the pickup interactable or pickup interactable game object to get the network object and then spawn it. So to do that, we have to come up here and say using unity.netcode. And this is why we're going to return if we're not the owner, because outside of also editing network variables, we're spawning a network object, which you can't do unless you are the server, which in our case is also the host. So again, reference the item pickup interactable game object or the pickup interactable, use .getComponent, and get the network object. And then we can just spawn it from here by saying .spawn. Cool. Awesome. Now we need to begin to work with some things that we don't have yet. So let's go make some new variables on this pickup item interactable. The first thing we're going to need is a header for the creature drop. You can see we have world spawn pickup variables. So these are only going to be used really if this is a world spawn item. Let's make a header for a creature loot pickup, and this is going to be used if this item is dropped from a creature and not spawning naturally in the world. So make a network variable of type int, and I'm going to rename this world spawn pickup ID, this item ID here. Again, I'm going to name this to interactable ID, or actually better yet, world spawn interactable ID, because this is a unique ID that tells you if you've already looted this specific interactable in the world. So I'll make a comment here so it's clear too. This is a unique ID given to each world spawn, so you don't loot the item more than once. Now this up here will actually be the item ID of the item on this. So we need this so basically if you join the game as a client, you can fetch the item using the item ID. So now back over to drop item. We're going to say pickup interactable.itemid.value is equal to generated item.itemid. Cool. So what do we do from there? We need to make an onItemID changed function here. That's important. So it'll actually update the item for us. So let's do a protected void onItemID changed, int old value and int new value. Now it doesn't matter if you use the new value or the item ID network variable up here. I just like using the network variable. It's just preference. It does the exact same thing, so don't worry about it in this case. So if pickup item is equal to pickup item, or item pickup type rather, dot character drop, then we want to actually get this item and apply it to the local item variable. And we do that by saying item is equal to world item database dot instance get item by ID, and this doesn't exist yet. So let's go ahead and make that. So let's jump over to the, and we're going to pass the item ID dot value also. Let's jump over to the world item database, and let's copy any of these fetch functions here. I'm going to copy weapon item, get weapon by ID. Going to change weapon to item. Going to change again weapons to items. We're going to search the whole list. So this is just going to search everything really, and just get any item by its ID. Short note too, if you find that when you add new items, you load in and it kind of breaks your load or save state with your previous items, this is because you need to give each item type a unique ID, so when you add new items, it doesn't change the ID of other items. If you want a short video on that, I can make one. I have it done for Nephilim too, so basically when I add new content, it doesn't break any existing save files. Alright, so I am going to call upon our on-network spawn and despawn. And then on network spawn, I'm just going to say itemid.onValueChanged plus equals onItemID changed. And I'm going to do the same thing with on network despawn, but I'm going to unsubscribe to it instead of subscribing to it. So this basically makes it so when the item ID changes, it updates the item variable here locally. Now we're going to have to call that later too if we're not the host as soon as we join, just to update whatever current item is there. Now let's go over to the pickup item interactable. Let's add a vector3 network variable for the network position. So I'm going to set that to vector3.0 by default. I'm just going to call it network position. Now what we want to do now is when we actually spawn this item as the host, set the network position, and then we're going to do the same thing here. We're going to make a protected void on network position changed. And then we're going to have a vector3 old position and a vector3 new position. Now again, I'm just going to reference the network variable directly instead of using the new position. It doesn't matter. Do whatever you want. So we're just going to simply say transform.position is equal to network position.value. All right, let's make sure we're setting the network position now over on both calling it on network spawn and despawn, but then also setting it when we actually instantiate the item drop. So on network spawn, network position dot on value changed plus equals on network position changed. Same thing for despawn, but unsubscribe. Okay, I'm actually going to go over here now to the on item ID changed. I'm going to, instead of saying if this is true, I'm going to say if this is not true, return. I just like the way that looks a bit better. It's a bit nicer and cleaner. I'm also going to copy that and come down here and use it for on network position change, because we're not ever going to really change this. If it's a world spawn, it's just static. It's never going to change the position. So pickup interactable. This is on drop item, by the way, the function. .network position .value is equal to transform .position. So right now, if we do that, it's going to spawn the item at the character's feet, which isn't all bad. But I'm going to show you an alternative also. So let's copy our world item pickup and let's duplicate it. I'm just going to call it world item pickup so we know it's different. I'm going to call this creature drop item pickup interactable. I'm going to drag this into the prefab that we have in the world item database, change it to character drop, very important. See, there's a pickup type there, make sure you do that. Make sure it's in your network prefabs list, like mine is right there. Otherwise, it'll have problems spawning on the network. Go to your world item database and drag it in right there. All right, cool. Now, this should be working. I'm going to go over to the undead dummy and Dirk, give him a AI character inventory manager. I'm only going to use the undead dummy though, if I'm being honest. We won't set up Dirk. So let's go over and give the undead dummy some drops. So I'm going to make him drop a knight's armor and a broadsword. And I'm going to save that. Okay, let's go back to the AI character network manager. And we're going to override is dead changed, on is dead changed. Yeah, so here's where you can check for owner again if you do want to check on the actual AI character inventory script. So let's override awake. Let's get an AI character manager variable. Let's get that under get component, AI character manager on awake. And then on is dead changed, we're simply going to call AI character. Oh, we need to call the AI character inventory manager on that as well. Let's do that real fast. Let's go to the AI character manager script. Let's open that up. Let's go to the variables here. Let's add a new one, hide inspector, public. Then we're going to make this an AI character inventory manager script. We're going to call this AI character inventory manager. On awake, we're going to get that by saying AI character inventory manager is equal to get component AI character inventory manager. Jump back over to the network manager here. On is dead changed. We're going to say AI character inventory manager drop item. Cool. All right, save that. Let's just go to this function. So you can see here I'm checking for his owner. You can alternatively check for it on that network on is dead changed. Make sure this is not a host only interactable for your prefab. Let's go into the game now and test it out. So I'm going to set this gentleman's drop chance to 100 just so you can see if this works or not. So let's go over here now and find him in the hierarchy. He's not here. I think he might be at the bottom. Yeah, he's down here. All right. Drop chance 100. So this is 100% chance now. He should drop an item. Let's attack him and kill him. 1, 2, 3, and riposte. So, yes, I can see it glowing in him right there, but it's a little bit beneath the floor, so you could raise it up and set the position up a little bit if you want. But in Elden Ring, the item tracks roughly the lock-on position of an enemy, but we can't parent it under their spine or the lock-on position, because you can see here a network object can only be parented under a game object with a network object script. So what that means is, let me just show you. Our dummy here has a network object script. So if I parent it under him and spawn it there, so I can drag it just under him right here, that's fine. We can reset the transform, but that's at his feet. It's not going to track his chest. You could move up a bit, but it's never going to work out perfectly. Now, if I go to his, say, spine 2 or spine 1 where the lockup position is, if I try to drag this in here, you can see it throws me an error. It does not want to do that. It's because there's no network object script under this game object. So you could add one there if you wanted to and do it that way somehow. Or what you could do, I'm just going to add a bool here. I'm going to call this track dropping creature. So track dropping creature's position. I'm going to defaultly set this to true. Now, a note, if you're going to do this, you want to disable the game object when your player is basically far away from it, because this is going to utilize a coroutine, which is going to run every frame. Now, it's not very expensive if you just have a couple items, but if you have like 10 or 20 in the map that are basically all loaded at the same time, you'll start noticing things slowly over time. So let's make a new long here for dropping creature's ID, and I'll explain this more in a moment towards the end. Don't worry for now. This is optional, so you can actually not even activate this if you don't want to. Over here now on the drop item, what we're going to do is come down here and go to the pickup interactable, and we're going to say pickup interactable dot dropping creature ID. What we want to do is pass the network object ID of the AI character. So this is the spawn ID of it when it's spawned on the network. So we can just do that by saying AI character dot network object ID. Okay, cool. Great, save that. Jump back over here now. Let's make an on creature ID changed here. So whenever this ID changes, we're going to do something. I'll call it on dropping creature ID changed. Make an oolong variable for old and one for new. And again, I'm just going to use the one we have up there, not the new ID that's being passed. I'm going to say if tracking dropping creature's position, then we're going to do some logic. And we're going to want to run a coroutine here. So protected IEnumerator. And you can call this whatever makes the most sense to you. I'm just going to call it track dropping creature or dropping creature's position. And I'm specifically going to track the lock on position. Or if you want to give it a custom variable too, like somewhere in the chest, you can. But I'm just going to use the lock on position because 99% of the time that's in the creature's midpoint. So if track dropping creature position is true, start this coroutine. Now, what is this coroutine going to do? Well, it's just going to set the transformed out position of this object to a certain transformed out position. So let's not worry about that specifically for right now. Let's set up some other things to actually get to this point. First, let's get the creature variable by the AI character manager. We're going to call this dropping creature. And we're going to use this network ID we're passing. And we're going to say the dropping creature is equal to network manager.singleton.spawn manager. And then it's .spawned objects. And then you want to pass the actual oolong variable here. So let's pass that. And then using that, you want to make sure you say .value. Otherwise, it's going to throw you an error here. It's going to be like, what do you mean? And then we're going to say .gameObject.getComponent. And then we're going to get an AI character manager variable. Now, if this AI character manager variable is not null, or if it is null, rather, you want to stop the coroutine somehow or get out of this. But if it's not null, then we're going to say tracking is true. So we're going to track a position. So let's make a bool for track creature is equal to false. And right here, we'll set this to true, just in case. It could be null through some unforeseen circumstances. All right, so then we're going to say right under here, if track creature, then we're going to do a while loop. And we can say while the game object is active in the hierarchy. I'm using this specifically because later on I'm going to show you how to basically disable AI that are too far away from the player, so you're not having 50 unloaded AI still running around running their updates. Then we're going to say transformed position is equal to dropping creature character combat manager lock on transform position. All right, and then we're going to use in this while loop yield return null, and then just at the bottom here again to yield return null. So again, if you're going to have a lot of items dropping, I highly recommend turning off items that are a certain distance away from your player and just retoggling them. If you don't know how to do that, I can also make a video on that. I have that done in Nephilim too, but we're going to get around to doing that in the future anyway for creatures, and I'll do it for items as well. And just add it to your on-network spawn and on-network despawn. Subscribe to these events, so whenever the dropping creature ID changes, you run this. And I'm just going to make sure that if it's not a character drop, we're returning, because we don't need to do that. All right, cool. Now, over here on Pickup Item Interactable, let's make a header for drop sound effects, just to add a little bit more polish to it. I'm going to use the one audio clip right now. I'm just going to drag it from Nephilim. You can make one or find thousands of these online. They're available in the asset store for free. There's a bunch of stuff you can get for this, so go ahead and make your own if you want, or just use one of those. And what I'm going to do here now is on network spawn, I'm going to say if the pickup type is equal to a character drop, we're just going to use this audio source that I'm about to put in here, make a private audio source variable, and get that on awake. Use get component because we're going to put it on the same game object as the script. And we're just going to play the item drop sound effects from this audio source by saying audio source.play one shot, and we pass the item drop sound effect. Now the reason why we're doing this on network spawn is because this is going to play instantly as soon as this object is spawned on the network. All right, let's save that. Let's go over now to the prefab. Let's add an audio source. I'm going to drag the spatial blend, I believe it's called, all the way up to 1, so it's 3D sound. Yes. So if it's not on 1, it's going to play as if it wasn't 3D everywhere. But if it's on 1, it's going to play depending on how close you are to it. It's how loud it's going to be. I'm going to drop in my sound effect here that I took from Nephilim. Common drop. Cool. I'm going to put that on there right now. And where's that variable? Right here. Cool, cool, cool. All right. this should be working as intended. I'm just going to go into the play mode real quick and test something, make sure it's all working so far. I'm going to go in here now, and I am naked. And that Cinti model's face is very, very terrifying. I'm going to go down to the dummy again, set the drop chance to, oh, that's Dirk, wrong one. Going to set the drop chance to 100%. And I'm going to kill this guy and make sure this is all working. So I want the sound effect to play, I want the drop to pop up, and I want nothing to be broken. So let's do a riposte, and boom, look at that. There we go. It tracks to his lock composition. There it is. Excellent. All right, so if I pick this up right now, it's going to destroy the object, and that image on the UI is kind of squat up. We're not keeping that image the way it should be, the same size. We'll fix that in a moment. So go over to interact here on the pickup item interactable. We want to make sure we're checking to see if our player is already performing an action. We don't want to be able to pick up the item while they're in, say, a riposte like I just was, because we also want them to play an animation themselves. So I'm going to say if the player is performing an action, return, don't do anything. And then I'm going to make them play an animation here. So just where they play a sound effect right after that, I'm just going to say, I know I already have 2 there, but I'm going to call it 2 again. Play an animation. Let's do player.playeranimatormanager.play target action animation pickup item _1. This doesn't exist yet. I'm going to make it, set it to true, so we are in an action. Now, if you are a patron, I'm going to link a free animation down below from Nephilim that you can download. If not, you can find lots of these on places like MeXMO and stuff like that for free. And there's a bunch of animation assets on the US store where you can buy one if you want. Going to set up my avatar to the low poly man, set these both to original like so, apply them, and then I'm going to drag this in. Make sure you're on the humanoid animator because that's our players. You don't need this for the enemy unless you want your enemies to pick up stuff. I'm going to say pick _up _01, pick up item, sorry. Drag it back to the empty state so you're not locked in it forever. Go back to the game here now, and let's go and full screen this. I am going to kill this man again and make sure this is still working as intended. Let's hit him 3 or 4 times, do a riposte, that kills him, there's the item, cool. Let's walk over, make sure he's dead first, and now we should play the animation, and yes we do. Okay, so that image, you can see it's not preserving its aspect ratio. Let's go fix that real quick. Go to the Player UI Manager prefab here, and go down. Copy any of your quick slot items, because we have that setting in there, set to true. Copy the item icon component settings, let me just show you. So you have the item icon right here, and the image is not simple, so we can't set it. So right click, copy left to right item icon, paste it here. The image will be set to a simple type image. Make sure you re-enable the image. I didn't do it in this clip feature tab here. Make sure you do that or else you won't see the image. And let's go back here into the pickup item interactable, and we're going to see on network spawn, if we're not the owner, we want to call all of these on item ID change, on position change, and on dropping creature change. So remember, these only update if it's changed, but like I said before in past videos, if you join and these values haven't been changed, it won't update to reflect its new position or item ID or what have you. So let's call them right now. And if you did the player UI changes like I just did, the aspect ratio of the item icon should now always adjust so it's not stretched and looking all weird and sad. Alright, so on network, or on item ID change 0, pass the item value, pass vector 3 0, then the network position value, and then on dropping creatures ID change, pass 0, and then the network creatures dropping ID, whatever I call that, dropping creature ID.value. There we go. Alright, that looks good. I think that's it. Actually, let's save this. Just check everything over before I stop. Oh yeah, destroy game object. This one's important. So we can't destroy this if we're not the host. So what we want to do, you could just do 2 separate statements here. So we could say if you're not the owner, do one thing. And then if you are the owner, destroy the game object. This is acceptable, but we can just condense this down to 1 line and just basically make it so the host and the non-host do the same thing. So non-owners can't destroy network objects. So let's make a server RPC. Make sure you set require ownership to false. And then we're just going to, it's going to be one simple function, no client RPC needed. Just protected void. We can call this destroy this game object, or if you want to, you can give it a different name. Destroy this network object, server RPC. And all we're going to do is check to see if we are the server. And if we are the server, we're going to simply destroy this game object, or despawn it rather. So if is server, we can say get component network object. And then what we have to do is say .despawn, and this will destroy the object and take it off of the network. Alright, cool. Now we can just come up here, and all we have to do is just call destroy this network object server RPC, and regardless if you're the host or the client, it will do the same thing. Alright, save that. Now let's jump into the game here. You can see I have a multiplayer example, so I will come over now and I will attack and kill this AI who's already has his drop chance set to 100%. And oh, I just whipped the swing. There we go. Now you see a drop right there right in front of me. I'm going to take the second client, come over and loot the drop, and it should disappear from the network. And boom, yes it does. And they also have the item in their inventory. Cool, working as intended. So again, one more time, if I go over here now, we can test it on single player. I'll set the drop to 100. You can see it from this point of view. I'll full screen it. We can go over here and we can kill this guy one more time. Boom, boom, boom. And then I'll do a repost. You can see the network object spawns there on his log composition. It tracks his body. And then we can go over and loot it. And there you go. Alright guys, so there you go. You have a way to get drops from AI characters and loot them now. So that is the world drop and the AI character drops concluded. Now, some notes, some very important notes. If you're making a very item pickup heavy game, what I do is I have these things I refer to as activation beacons on all of my interactables. Anything that moves in the game responds, like your AI, your pickup items, any kind of chests or stuff that will pop up. And there's a ring around the player, like a beacon. And when the player gets so far away from these, it disables the objects. And then when the beacon gets back in range, it re-enables the object. So if you want a video on how to do this, I'm going to make it in the future. But if you want to try it now, here's how I do it. What you do is you make a beacon game object. And when the player gets out of a certain distance, you can use a collider away from your AI or items. You disable them. And then when you disable them, they spawn their beacon. And then when the player comes back around, the beacon is just a game object with a collider that's invisible. When the player comes back around and touches the beacon is hidden, and then it respawns or turns back on the AI character or the pickup item interactable. This makes it so, if you have 30 items on the ground, or you've destroyed or you've passed 80 enemies in an area, as you get too far away, it just turns them off, because it will start to lag your game if you don't consider those things. I have a very, very in-depth video I want to make on optimization, especially in larger worlds, because I've learned a lot from making my projects, so I will do that eventually as well. But, as always, guys, thank you very much for joining me again this weekend. I hope you all have a very lovely weekend. A special thank you and shout out, as always, to my patrons. It is because each and every one of you, I get to keep doing this, so you have my sincerest gratitude. If you guys want to see a specific video in the Elden Ring series next up, just let me know if you have any mechanic that you've been waiting for me to cover that you really want to see. If not, I will continue on with my list. But if there's something you want to see specifically, just let me know. Alright guys, that's it for me. I will see you guys in the next one.